I seem to find myself getting stuck on seasonal games, especially here lately, and the game I'd love to talk to you about in this video correlates a lot with our current time of the year, which is Halloween, and there is no better time to implement this title in this video any other time than now. Also, I'm feeling a bit sick, so please excuse my voice in advance. And with that being said, let's dive straight in. So, Witchfire, or most importantly, why Witchfire? I think that's where I should probably start this conversation in the first place. Heavily inspired by Warhammer and Souls-like titles, this one is a bittersweet for the new beginners. In other terms, for people like myself trying to get into this very specifically designed style of gaming, especially for this particular genre with little to no experience under our belts. Witchfire not only is designed to be a more forgiving title in that way, but it is also a very well-made game. Designed by a very small group of devs, I found myself playing this one for quite some time from the very beginning, with an exceptional satisfaction in return. Witchfire has completely stepped out from an early access world and now is fully polished, offering 6 different maps to choose from. Which I know on paper it sounds rough and not great, but once you get the concept of how the game actually works, it's actually fairly well balanced in that regard. Although the map atmosphere doesn't change, the enemy spawns and loot gear, on the other hand, do. And I will explain here in a little bit. Basically, upon every enemy you eliminate, you gain souls-like crystals or flames, which are used and messed with further in the game, once you arrive back to your save zone, that is. The maps are being controlled by the witch herself, and you are the one and only who can enter those realms, which is basically a blessing or a curse. Technically speaking, you are a sinner that is trapped in this multi-dimensional universe which allows you to obtain witchcraft, which sounds pretty bad apples in my opinion. Depends on how you look at these things. You are basically a witch slayer. You as a player get to choose one of a variety of different classes, and based on the class that you choose, it will determine how you go about your approach and your game style. Fundamentally, you get to choose whether you want to play with more magic or stealthy approach, or the gun blazing style, or even a long range. Just a disclaimer, every class gets to play with magic, so don't worry about losing that mechanic fully. You can be limited to certain ones based on the class that you choose, but nonetheless, you get to use magic regardless of what class you are in. Every class has a unique progression system attached to them, so obviously, just like any other Souls-like title, choosing your class is a big decision to make. It's almost as important as choosing what college you want to go to. The weapon progression in this game is one of a kind and probably the strongest pillar in Witchfire. As you complete certain milestones, you get to upgrade the way your weapon is handled, and every weapon has its own perk attached to it. For example, I chose a guy that runs around with a ricochet rifle, which starts out as a normal automatic rifle, but then as you make further progress in the game, you get to customize it quite a bit. And one of the perks of that rifle, or at least it can be, every time you shoot at an enemy, each bullet fire bounces back and forth between multiple enemies if they are in the group standing next to each other, which makes weaker enemies evaporate like dust once you level up later in the game, and they just become an extra thing to worry about. Now, this is basically an extraction shooter that relates a lot to Escape from Tarkov, and there are also certain elements of it that remind me a lot of Destiny. As you loot around the map and collect flames from different enemies, you must be able to return back to your safe zone in one piece. And if you don't, everything you've collected will have to be left behind and essentially recollected from your previous character. And then you repeat the process all over again. But the trick is, as you level up, you will gain more experience and become more fearful as you will. But remember guys, with power comes great responsibility. Now upon leveling yourself up, you have different new types of enemies that really will keep you on your toes. The first enemies you encountered before you leveled up, they always remain the same. They don't get buffed or more experienced even when you personal level up. They do, however, become an annoyance, which is completely fine and becomes just a part of the game. As you level yourself up, the damage you'll be doing to them is going to be very significant, especially with an upgraded weapon skills. Now, if you are completely new to this genre, you may have a hard time getting to understand the concept of this game, but it does click within the first hour or two, I promise. But if I can speed up the process for you and you're watching this video as a new player, think of it as this. Imagine you're sitting in the room with a witch playing a board game, sort of like Monopoly. except she gets to place and control the enemies on that board, and you as a player, rather than sit right across from her and control your enemies and fight her that way, you get to be on that board fighting them yourself and playing by her rules that she sets for you. But essentially you're coming after her and she does not like you either. There's obviously a lot more to it. This is just a brief overview of how the game actually works. I really hope that helps to explain Witchfire's concept, but honestly once I understood that, the game just clicked for me and I ended up spending a crap ton of time just grinding through its progression system. Which leads to my next point. Listen, I'll be honest with you guys, I have never been a diehard fan for Souls-like games. I still am not whatsoever. But if there is one game that will introduce me to those games in the proper way, it would be Witchfire. It is incredibly forgiving in that regard. The progression system alone is so well done and addicting in itself, and I truly had a really good time with this one. This video was not paid or requested by devs. I simply stumbled across this game on Steam, realized that I had money sitting in my Epic's account, and I ended up getting it. It is such a great game. Optimization is great. It looks phenomenal. What else can I ask for? I will say, playing this on high settings or ultra settings, man, this makes my 3070 Ti really puff and huff. If there is the slightest part of you that wants to try this game out, if you're still debating about it and you think there is a possibility that you may like this game, listen, if that is you, then by all means go and buy it. On the other hand, if you're the type that looked at this and wasn't impressed or even slightly moved by Witchfire, then this is probably not for you, which is also fine, to each their own. But the bottom line is, if there is the slightest part of you igniting interest towards this title, whatever it may be, if you try this game, you are more than likely going to love it. Just plain and simple.